Mark Schipper is with us. He is, I really love his feed. If you haven't seen it, Fifth Down College Football joins us, Craig and Paul, David Smoke on 365 Sports. Mark, tell everybody what you do. You have a newsletter and much, much more. And I thought I saw where you might be writing a book. Is that correct?
Yeah, what's going on, guys? How are you doing? Thanks for having me on. I am indeed writing a book on college football. It's the intersections of college football with American history and culture. I argue that college football is inseparable from American history and culture in very unique ways. And so I made a big odyssey across the country. I went to many of the sport's best rivalries, best stadiums, visited campuses, and just did a big of the history of this game in American history. And I'm putting that together in sort of a big travel odyssey book. And for people who love college football, I have no doubt they'll love this story and learning about where this sport came from and kind of why we love it so much.
What is going to be the name of the book? Sorry, Paul.
Well, the title is not fully settled. It's going to be out this spring, but the one I'm looking at, the one I'm feeling right now is American Odyssey, and we'll have a subtitle below that.
Okay.
Mark, you are speaking my language personally. These are all things that I love: travel, history, and college football. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff on your site where you talk about Hemingway writing about Notre Dame and USC, Red Grange, like all the way to Steve Spurrier, and all of that. What was the coolest story experience in this journey that you had of finding out about some things that maybe people don't know about college football?
Well, there was so much stuff. I went to so many games. I mean, really the best games, many of them that this sport has to offer. You mentioned one of them. I spent a morning with Steve Spurrier in Gainesville at his new restaurant, and it was just he and I, and we hung out. I shot some video, asked him a bunch of questions. We walked around his restaurant, which is full of memorabilia, and we just talked college football and sports. Another really cool stop was in Norman, Oklahoma. I hung out with Barry Switzer for a morning, and we got together outside Oklahoma's training complex, and the coach and I talked football and sort of just Americana for a while. And that was, so talking to Spurrier and Switzer in person was an incredible experience for me. But then just traveling around the country, I did some cool stuff. I took the train from Chicago to South Bend, Indiana for USC Notre Dame, which is how they used to go to that game for years. And for years, they played it in Chicago at Soldier Field because Notre Dame Stadium wasn't big enough on campus. So a bunch of stuff like that's going to show up in the book where people are going to, kind of see where we were and where we are.
We have discussed many things from over the weekend, but the thing that Saturday night in Austin, Georgia, Texas, so much came out of that game, and Georgia wins 30-15. What did you see when Georgia's defense obviously were let out of the pound like rabid dogs against UT's offensive line and Quinn Ewers?
Yeah, I saw Texas's offensive line get confused by Georgia's defense. Georgia's defense looked like it was playing on another level for quite a bit of that game. Some of the stems and stunts and switches and blitzes they brought and coverages they switched, I thought it really confused Quinn Ewers. And then on top of being confused, his offensive line missed some assignments and some blocks, and he got rocked pretty good a couple of times. So when you're looking at Quinn Ewers and the Heisman chatter and the best quarterback in college football chatter, that was clearly a humbling performance, even benched toward the end of the first half. So, meeting number one between Texas and Georgia, that was a decisive Georgia victory, and Texas is going to have to be sharper if they meet again.
Mark, though, with Texas and Oklahoma in the SEC this year, obviously Texas is much more ready to join than Oklahoma, but we have already seen stark realities of this is what you wanted when you jumped in. Yeah, and they'll be fine. Jumping conferences like this, moving leagues, the first is almost always going to be tough. There are a few examples of teams moving over and just thriving early. Penn State came into the Big Ten and had a pretty good year one and then won the league year two, 93, 94. But, leaving the Big 12 for the SEC, the week-to-week schedule is going to be different. The bodies in that league are different. So, the history, the heritage of those programs, the support they get from their fans, from their boosters, and the way the university facilitates football, I mean, they'll be able to get the guys they want, get them into school and get the players. So,
it's just going to be a process of adjusting. And then with Oklahoma in particular, I'm not sure the coaching situation is what they want it to be long term. So that's the other key, of course, is you have to get the right chieftain in to lead your program, or it's not going to work anywhere.
They have 4 more games, I guess, left in conference play, maybe 5, and every one of them, I think, is against a ranked team, including Ole Miss this week. They have Maine, which is that SEC stick some random game in the back of your schedule to give you a break. If they don't get another, what are they now, 3-4? If they don't get bowl eligible, you think Brent Venables, no matter the buyout, might be done there?
He could be. I never want to say no about that, because a school that's as serious about football as Oklahoma is, they will make the moves they feel like they need to make. I think it's going to depend on how Oklahoma looks and how Oklahoma plays. They dumped the offensive coordinator. So clearly the moment they felt Seth Luttrell was not the long-term answer at that position, they let him go, and they're going to try and work towards next season. So that could conceivably happen to Venables if they feel he's not the guy long term. But we'll see this week, first week with the reconfigured offensive situation, and then people are going to be looking hard at how hard Oklahoma's players play for this staff going forward. So that situation very much up in the air.
What were your thoughts on how tight the Big 12 is at the top with the 3 teams that they have? And then they've got others like Colorado right behind there knocking on the door.
Yeah, the Big 12 is a fascinating league to me. I put out a tweet not too long ago, and I said the correct quote about the Big 12 is it's not deep, but it's wide. And it's not necessarily, you wouldn't look at it and say there are 3 or 4 definite title contenders, but you would look across and say there are 8 or 9 teams that could all beat each other on any weekend. Look at Iowa State this weekend with Central Florida at home. I mean, escaped in the final moments. And Central Florida hasn't looked like a particularly good team this season. They're 3-4, 1-3 Big 12. So, some teams are coming on. Kansas State is starting to look better. BYU is another team that reminds me a little of TCU a few years ago. They keep winning. It's close. It's dangerous. They're playing with fire, but they keep winning. So the Big 12 to me, what was the other one I was going to bring up? Baylor at Texas Tech. Out of nowhere, Texas Tech looked like it was a bit of a rising team, had some momentum, had figured stuff out, and Baylor just blasts them 59-35. And, Baylor's 3-4, 1-3 overall. So to me, that's kind of what the Big 12 is this year. Is it's just wide. There are just a lot of teams that can win on any Saturday, and it's entertaining football for certain.
Let me ask you about Army-Navy. Army's off this week. Navy's playing Notre Dame at home, or actually at MetLife. But it's been a great story. First time since the late 20s that both of them are unbeaten this deep in the season. Vanderbilt 25. What are your thoughts about just the reminiscing about Army-Navy? And they each have had some nice runs of late, but rarely has it been together.
Yeah, it's incredible. It is fun. It's like we're flashing back to like the World War II era or the World War I era. It's all of a sudden Army and Navy are just hammering everyone they play. It's been incredible. I mean, so many of these games have been blowouts, and the kind of scores you just don't see the service academies put up because they're so methodical generally with their triple option offenses, and they don't go downfield all that often. And that's just not true this year for either program. I love it personally because I love service academy football. They both play in great stadiums. Their campuses are fantastic, and they're such unique pieces to this country, and the fact they play football at the highest level. So, it was funny when they moved to the American, and it was discovered that they could play in the conference championship game against each other and then would play the regular Army-Navy game the week after. Everyone kind of assumed, all right, well, that's neat, but that'll never happen. They'll never play back-to-back weeks like that. And all of a sudden, it looks like year one with both in the league, it very well could happen. So that would be a bizarre situation to have them play twice like that. But for me and for anybody who likes the academies, this year has been amazing.
Yes, like anytime something like that, well, that won't happen. It happens.
Yeah. Absolutely. Mark, one of the articles you wrote on your site was from September 27th, and it is about the history of amateurism and the NCAA and where it came from. And it is a fantastic read for anybody who's trying to cope with the idea of how we got here and the craziness that is college sports. And I'm not at all shocked to read that Walter Camp was the guy who really kind of created the fake amateurism that the NCAA was all the way back in the early days of this. And especially he was also the guy, and I'm sure you know this, that hated the forward pass. He did not want the forward pass. He thought it was not the game, and fought when Teddy Roosevelt made everybody get in a room and make rules against the forward pass. But tell us a little bit about Walter Camp and being the original bagman.
Yeah, well, Walter Camp, that's true about the forward pass. And the reason, he had multiple reasons he didn't like it, but one of the main ones was, and this was always, if you're wondering why Walter Camp thinks one way or the other, is it good for Yale? He really ran that program. He was only actually coach for a few years, but he was the CEO, architect, owner, operator, essentially, of Yale football for 30 years. And he recruited guys. He made sure guys got paid. He got them housed. He got them basically old-timey name, image, and likeness deals. I mean, he signed them to – they'd get commissions on cigarette packs sold in New Haven. They could sell the scorecards at Yale baseball games, and they'd make a good living playing football for Yale, and Yale was dominant. So – yeah, the original idea of amateurism, it came over from England, actually, and it was the gentleman amateur ideal. And it was really, there was nothing else behind it other than kind of a class argument, which is upper class doesn't want to compete against lower class, which if you're thinking about the United States, that doesn't really make sense over here because we don't have the English class system. But it didn't stop our universities, and they essentially decided that to be an amateur and to be unpaid and to compete was what gentlemen do, and it was the high status thing to do. So they developed college football along those lines. And for no really better reason than that, it caught hold. And so anything that was ever paid to these athletes, any compensation, it was under the table. And that came forward to our day. So it's we're living through a radical departure. Once the schools decided that they were going to share media revenue directly with athletes, which is what's going to happen in the starting next season, I believe, that is as far a departure from where this game began with guys like Walter Camp back in the late 1800s as you could possibly get. So it's a bit complex, but that's kind of the basic gist of it.
I just wanted to highlight it because the more I read about things, throughout history, the more you find out the reason we do things now that don't make sense is because somebody 150 years ago did it this way and we didn't change. So if you're ever wondering why we did it this way in the first place, it's because Walter Camp thought that we should all be gentlemen. And then
the gentleman amateur.
Yeah. I wonder what, and again, this is not old man get off my lawn because that could even be me at times, but what Newt Rockne, Walter Camp, among some of those others, would think of where college football is today?
Well, I think they'd be bewildered by it, to be honest. It was so different. Newt Rockne died in 1930, so his heyday was in the late teens in the 1920s. And there wasn't even such thing as a grant and aid scholarship at that time. So rules were very loose, and what you could give to players and not give to players, to provide housing, to provide books and schooling. It was in a lot of ways very informal. So one of the advantages Newt Rockne did have at Notre Dame in those early days, Notre Dame was not the prestige university that it is today, is football ruled the campus. And Rockne was one of the most famous people, not, in his state, in the United States. He was famous in his home country of Norway. I mean, he became that big. You couldn't really overstate how famous Newt Rockne was in the 20s. He wouldn't understand what was going on today. He'd have to be brought up to speed. You'd have to explain to him what a athletic scholarship was. Start there and go forward.
One thing, Mark, and again, if you have not been on his Twitter feed, it's Fifth Down College Football CFB. Plus, he's also writing that book. Also heard on ESPN, Sirius XM, and major media outlets, including ours here on 365 Sports. Alabama has now had the huge win against Georgia, and now they've had losses, of course, a couple of them, including Vanderbilt and then Tennessee. They play, I think, is it Missouri next? I don't know what's going to happen there, but do you think that if they were to lose another game here in the next week or two, that there will be some voters in the AP poll that will shake? Their hands would start shaking about dropping them out of the top 25?
Yeah, possibly. Possibly. I mean, how strange would that be after all these years of dominance? This already, I don't remember the exact number on this, but this is the first time Alabama has lost 2 games before mid-November since 2007. So that's how good this program has been for this long. But, it can be hard for people to separate past from present. It's Alabama. How could we possibly do that to them? But it's important to watch what's happening now and look at what condition they're in this season. And they're transitioning to a completely new program, totally new staff. It's a bit of a different style of play in a lot of ways, particularly on the defensive side. And it's clear it's gonna take a year to set in, and then next year we'll probably have a better idea of how Kalen DeBoer is really doing there, and if his style of coaching and running the program is catching on. But yeah, if they lose coming up to Missouri, they got LSU after that. They could absolutely fall out of the top 25.
Yeah, you wonder about. There's even some well, wait a minute, they've lost twice. They're still in the college football playoff mix, but if anyone else, if you took the name away, would probably, even though those were good, teams, Vanderbilt now in the top 25. There's nothing wrong. College football can survive without Alabama being in the playoff or inside the top 25. Thanks for your time, Mark. Great stuff. Good luck with the book. When did you say it was going to be sometime this spring?
Yeah, it'll be this. I want to get the first 12-team playoff is going to be the coda to the book, the final chapter, bowl season, postseason, and we'll get the first 12 teams. So, yeah, shortly after that this spring, it'll be out.
We'll look forward to it, and when it comes out, we'll get you back on. Hopefully before then, but get you back on again to promote it. Thanks for your time. Good luck with it.
All right, guys. Appreciate you. Had a good time.
You too. Mark Schipper with us. Again, it's a heck of a book he's writing.